Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at. This is Dr. Diane Sanchez, and I am going to review Training Human Resources. That is our Chapter 8. Our learning objectives is to define training and discuss why a strategic approach is important, identify 3 types of analysis used to determine training needs, specify how to design and evaluate an orientation program, explain different means of internal and external training delivery, describe the importance of e-learning as part of the current training efforts, provide an example for each of the 4 levels of training evaluation. So, the nature of training. What is training? It is the process by which people acquire capabilities to perform jobs. Training provides employees with specific, identifiable knowledge and skills for use in their present positions. Organizational training may include hard skills, such as teaching sales representatives how to use intranet resources, and they can also train soft skills, which are critical in many instances. That may include communicating, mentoring, managing a meeting, or working as part of a team. So the benefits of training provides, like I said, the specific identifiable knowledge and skills, create ability to adapt and innovate, better self-management, and performance improvement. The difference between training and development is training imparts specific identifiable knowledge and skills for use in present jobs. Development is a broader focus. Focuses on gaining new capabilities useful for both present and especially future jobs. So here is figure 8.1, which you can read in your book. It talks about the types of training, which is required and regular. That may be safety compliance, wage and hour rules, sexual harassment training. And then you've got interpersonal and problem solving, things like communication, coaching, problem analysis, conflict resolution. And then job and technical, customer service, telecommunications, IT. And then developmental and career, business trends, strategic thinking, change management, leadership. So what are the legal issues and training? Training design and delivery. First, the criteria and practices used to select the individuals. So one of the major concerns is, what is the criteria and practices that you use to select individuals for the inclusion in training programs? Organizations need to make sure these factors are job-related and do not result in disparate impact, because training can be considered an opportunity for advancement in the organization. Employees who work overtime must be compensated. That means that if they are getting training over their time and they've worked over 40 hours, or in some states over 8, they need to be compensated for the time that they're getting trained. And then another legal issue is around requiring employees to sign training contracts to protect the costs and time invested in special employee training. So for example, a firm may spend a lot of money on somebody to get specialized equipment, and the firm requires that they sign an agreement that will be forgiven each year if the employee stays, but if they leave, then they are owing the company some time or some money back. And so the Department of Labor really has been concerned about this. Some healthcare and IT firms do it. So it's something you should be cautious about. The benefits of strategic training really help accomplish organizational goals. For example, if the sales increases are a critical part of the company's strategy, appropriate training would identify what is causing lower sales and recommend a solution. Reduces the tendency to depend on training alone to solve performance problems. And your book gives great examples of Walt Disney World, where the company has established specific training plans that result in greater experiences for the guests, and it is so effective. It helps assess whether training can address the most important performance issues. So it can also be helpful in organizational competitiveness, and so areas of knowledge management, the way the organization identifies and leverages knowledge to be competitive. So a lot of companies are now participating in knowledge management systems where individuals will consciously go in and put in the information that is necessary to know about the job so that the right people are selected at the right time for that. To be effective, training must be integrated with the job performance and the employee learning. Of course, sales training is, again, extremely important. It ties back to the organizational competitiveness. It improves that. It covers a wide variety of skills and strategy development, such as negotiation skills, presentation, and so on and so forth, customer service. Linking strategies to training. This is in your book, and it kind of gives you a highlight of what the various organizational strategies are. Most are to increase sales, expand into overseas market, develop new product lines, and acquire competitor company. So necessary outcomes to implement those strategies may be identifying key sales elements and train sales force, assign key people to provide necessary global training, train production and sales on new products, assimilate employees from new company, and provide orientation and training. Training activities now: performance consulting, design training, intercultural competence, language training, new product training, production practice, sales simulations, and then onboarding corporate cultural training addresses all of those organizational strategies. Global assignment training, orientation and training that expatriates and their family receive after departure. And we did this at American Airlines and at Boeing, and it's absolutely wonderful because it offers them some great success on their overseas assignment. It produces a positive effect on cross-cultural adjustment, which is always hard when families are going to other countries. It's crucial to the global strategic success as businesses expand overseas. Intercultural competence is really a global employers are providing more and more of this competence training, and it incorporates three things: cognitive, what does the person know about other cultures; the emotional, how does the person view other cultures and how sensitive is the person to cultural customs and issues; and then behavioral, how does the person act in intercultural situations. This can be very, very helpful training, not only for the employee, but for their families. Training plans. Effective training plan efforts consider the following questions: is there really a need for training? Who needs to be trained? Who will do the training? What form will the training take? And how will knowledge be transferred to the job? And lastly, how will the training be evaluated, which is really the hardest part of the whole program. Orientation, planned introduction of new employees. Most of you have orientation programs at your company, but that is a form of training. It achieves several key purposes. It establishes a favorable impression of the organization. It provides organizational and job information. It enhances interpersonal acceptance by coworkers. It accelerates socialization and integration of the new employee into the organization. And it ensures the employee performance and productivity begin more quickly. Now, more and more companies are expanding their orientation period to almost a year. And we did this at Delta Technology. It was very, very important that our employees spend a year learning about the business, the impressions of the company, getting really coworker acceptance and socialization was key. And it really helped our retention because we were recruiting technologists in a very high demand environment during pre-Y2K. So how do you evaluate your orientation program? Well, you've got tenure turnover rate. That's what percentage of new hires left the organization in 6 months or less. New hire failure factors. What percentage of the total annual turnover was new hires? Employee upgrade rate. What percentage of new employees received a high performance rating? And then development program participation rate. What percentage of new employees have moved on to training for or promotion to higher jobs? So this is the systematic training process. People call it the ADDIE model, assessment, design, delivery, training. But it starts with training needs, assessment, analyzing what is needed, identifying training objectives and criteria. Then you move to design, pre-test trainees, select training methods, plan training content, and then training delivery, schedule training, conducted training, monitor training, and then the evaluation of the training, measuring training outcomes, compare outcomes to training objectives and criteria. The analysis of the training needs is really very, very challenging, and it's probably one of the kind of hardest things you can do is assessing the training needs. And you've got to do an organizational analysis, which can be diagnosed by analyzing the organizational outcomes and looking at future organizational needs. A part of the planning for training is identifying the knowledge, skills, and abilities that will be needed now and in the future as both the job and organizations change. It also takes into account internal and external forces that will influence the training and must be considered when doing organizational analysis. So, for instance, the problems posed by technical obsolescence of current employees and an insufficiently educated labor pool for which to draw new workers should be confronted and incorporated in the training design. Job task is the second level of analysis, and that's a need to review the jobs involved and the task performed. Again, it's comparing the requirements of the job with the knowledge, skills, and abilities. So, for example, at a manufacturing firm, analysis identified that the task performed by engineers who served as technical instructors for other employees. By listing the tasks required of the technical instructor, the Human Resources Department was able to establish a program to teach specific instructional skills, and the engineers were able to become more successful instructors. And then the individual analysis. The most common approach for making individual analysis is to use performance appraisal data. And that'll help you determine really the needs assessment. And this is the graphic view, organizational analysis, and the different kinds of ways you can do it by grievances, accidents, training observations, customer complaints, exit interviews, attitude surveys, and then the job analysis, task analysis, the KSAs, job specs, efficiency data, employee surveys. And then individual analysis, performance appraisals, tests, records, questionnaires, surveys, all of that helps with your needs assessment. Establishing training objectives and priorities. So you've got to do a gap analysis, right, after all of this. And this really determines, what is your gaps in your areas, and it indicates the distance between the current and desired employee capabilities. And these are the types of training objectives that will be necessary for the training objectives. Attitude, creating interest in and awareness of the importance of something. So you've got to make sure your employees really are interested. For example, sexual harassment training. Knowledge, imparting cognitive information and details to trainees. Understanding how a new product works, for example. Skills, developing behavioral changes in how jobs and various task requirements are performed. Improving speed on an installation, for example. So that's really the priorities, the objectives and priorities of establishing a good training program. And then training design elements. This is really looking at the learner, the training, transfer, and the instructional strategies. So learner characteristics, do they have the ability to learn? Do they have the motivation to learn? Do they have self-efficacy, perceived utility, value, and learning styles? So let's go over that. The ability to learn. Motivation, a person's desire to learn the training content. Self-efficacy, people's belief that they can successfully learn the training program content. Perceived utility and value. Do they see that it is of value and that they'll be able to, use it and try it on the job? And then their learning styles have to be considered. Are they auditory learners? Are they best by listening to somebody? Or are they tactile? Learning must be getting in their hands on it. Or visual learners, thinking in pictures and figures. These are all characteristics that you need when developing training. You've got to understand the principles of adult learning. And, adults learn differently than younger people. And so you've got to incorporate the adult learning principles in training. So do they have a need to know why they are learning something? Yes, adult learners need to know why they are learning something. They have a need to be self-directed. They have a need to bring more work-related experiences into the process. They want to employ a problem-solving approach to learning, and they're motivated by both extrinsic and intrinsic values. Or factors, I'm sorry. So here's instructional strategies. And, basically this is an important part of designing training, is to select the right mix of teaching strategies to fit the characteristics. Practice, feedback, overlearning, behavioral modeling, error-based examples, and so forth and so on. So first, we've got to have active practice, performance of job-related tasks and duties by trainees during the training. And we do that in two ways. Spaced practice, which is occurs when several practice sessions are spaced over a period of hours of the day. And the second one is mass practice, occurs when a person performs all the practice at once. And so really, space practice works better for some types of skills and for physical learning that requires muscle memory, whereas mass practice is usually more effective for other kinds of learning, such as memorization, or memorizing tasks. Well, there's also the concept of overlearning, which is repeated practice even after a learner has mastered the performance, but overlearning also produces improvement in learning retention. Even with overlearning, refreshers are still sometimes necessary to maintain proficiency. Behavioral modeling is copying somebody else's behavior. That is really particularly appropriate for skill training in which trainees must use both knowledge and practice. Error-based examples is a method involving learners what can go wrong when they do not use the training properly. A good example is sharing with pilots what can happen when they are not aware of a situation they and their aircrafts are encountering. Situational awareness training that includes error-based examples improves air crew situational awareness. Error-based examples have been incorporated in military, firefighting, police, and aviation training and have wide potential uses in other situations. Case studies show that negative consequences of errors are a good tool for communicating error-based examples. Reinforcement. Reinforcement is based on the idea that people repeat responses that give them some type of positive reward, and they avoid actions associated with negative consequences. And then immediate confirmation. People learn best if they're reinforced and given feedback as soon as possible after the training. Transfer of training occurs when trainees actually use on the job what they learn, maintain use of learned material over time. To increase the transfer of training, offer trainees an overview of training content and process and how it links to the strategy of the organization. Ensure that the trainees mirror the job context. From training to the job, support new trainees to use their new skills when they return to the job. Supervisor support and involvement in the training, feedback from the supervisor immediately after they've done something well. Opportunity to use the training. Give them the opportunity to make sure they've used the training they got in the classroom if that was the case. And then accountability. Extent to which someone expects the learner to use the new skills on the job and holds them responsible for doing so. So your team members have gone to a training, and if they're not using those skills on the job, you've got to hold them accountable for those new skills. All right, training delivery considerations. These are all considerations you need. Nature of the training, the subject matter, number of trainees, individual versus team, self-paced versus guided, training resources costs, and e-learning versus traditional. The other training considerations, delivery considerations, is your geographic location, your time allocated, and the completion of your timeline. Here are the delivery options. So you can do it internally or externally. You can have internal training, which is traditional classes, on-the-job training, self-guided training at the company portal, mentoring or coaching, job shadowing, developing teachers internally, cross-training, training projects, and then group-based classroom. External is third-party delivery training. web conferences, training in an outside location, podcasts, educational leaves, blended training, and teleconferencing. So informal training occurs through interaction and feedback. And really, although informal training may seem to be a misnomer, a great deal of learning occurs informally in work organization. And some of it happens by design. On-the-job training is the most common type of training at all levels in the organization. And it's because it can be flexible and relevant to what employees do. Some problems with OJT may be poor qualified or indifferent trainers, disruption of the regular work, and bad or incorrect habits are passed on. So stages for on-the-job training. Well, you prepare the trainees, put them at ease, find out what they want to learn, get them interested, present the information, tell them, show them, question them, present one point at a time, make sure the trainees know. Then provide the trainees with practice. Have the trainees perform the task for you. Ask them questions. Observe and correct them. Evaluate how well they're doing and if they're mastering it. And then follow up. Put the trainees on their own. Check frequently about how they're mastering it, and then reduce the follow-up as performance improves. Cross-training. Cross-training occurs when people are trained to do more than one job, theirs and somebody else's. So for the employer, the advantages are that it adds to flexibility and development. The challenges are it's not favored by employees because they're seen of getting more and more work, and it threatens unions with loss of job jurisdiction and broadening of the jobs. And it requires scheduling work differently. It may cause a temporary decrease in productivity. External training advantages: it may be less expensive to outsource. You may not have the time to develop in-house training. You don't have the expertise internally, so you go outside, but they may lack expertise in your actual technical skills. There's advantages with interacting with outsiders. Outsourcing of training, government-supported job training is also good. Some of the government agencies offer it. Educational assistance programs. Now there can be a combination of training approaches. Forms of cooperative training. School to work. That's training that generally is a transition. It helps individuals move into jobs while they're still in school, or upon completion of formal schooling. So such efforts may be arranged with high schools, community colleges, or some universities. Apprentice training, I'll show a slide about what most common apprentice occupations, but it's basically providing the employee with on-the-job experience under guidance of a skilled and certified worker. And then internship usually combines job training with classroom instruction from schools, colleges, and universities. And that can both benefit the employers and the interns because the interns get real-world exposure. Here's examples of the most common apprenticeship occupations: electricians, carpenters, plumbers, pipe fitters, elevator constructor, roofers, sprinkler fitters. E-learning, online training. E-learning has exploded. And a lot of companies are using the internet or an organizational intranet to conduct the training online. There's different methods of e-learning: distance training learning, where many college and universities use some form of internet-based course support. and can make lecture contents available to the students, just like we are doing here at Amberton University. Simulations reproduce parts of the real world so they can be experienced, manipulated, and learning can occur. That is also games that, a lot of gaming is going on with our new Gen Yers. That's how they grew up, so there's exercises that entertain them and engage them using video and animation and graphics. It really can help with people learning, and it kind of gives them little simulations as well. So, games are successfully used in team building, communication, leadership, and time management. And then mobile learning, that's really, there's predictions that training will incorporate more use of your mobile devices like tablets and notebooks. They're doing that in schools now. And so, things like YouTube and those kinds of places, you can get learning from your mobile phone. And then there's blended learning, a combination of methods such as short, fast-paced, interactive, communicate-based lessons, teleconferencing with traditional classroom instruction, and simulation. So here's the advantages of e-learning. Advantages is it's self-paced, trainees can proceed in their own time, it's interactive, tapping multiple trainee senses. It enables scoring of exercises and assessments after you do the training. You get assessments and feedback. It incorporates built-in guidance and helps the trainees to use when needed. It allows trainers to update content easily. Can enhance instructor-led training. Is good for presenting simple facts and concepts. Can be paired with simulations. Disadvantages, it may cause trainee anxiety. Some of us are not that good on e-learning. Some trainees may not be interested in how it is used. It requires easy and uninterrupted access to computers. It's not appropriate for some training, such as leadership or cultural change. It requires significant upfront investment both in time and cost, and it requires significant support from top management to be successful. Some choose not to do it even if it is available. And you may want to consider your baby boomers and Gen Xers and all of those. So levels of training, there are 4 of them. Reaction, learning, behaviors, and results. So we evaluate by conducting interviews or administering questionnaires. So after you've gone to the training, there is a questionnaire or interviews. We measure how well trainees have learned facts, ideas, concepts, and theories, and attitudes. And then we measure the effect of training on job performance through observing their job performance. And then results. We measure the effect of training on the achievement of organizational objectives. And this is probably the hardest part. The difficulty with measuring results is pinpointing whether changes were actually the result of training or of other major factors. So, for example, the managers who completed the interviewing training program can be measured on employee turnover before and after the training, but turnover also depends on the current economic situation, the demands for workers, and many other variables. So training evaluation metrics is the cost-benefit analysis. It's a comparison of cost and benefits associated with the training. It gives you the ROI and it benchmarks. And this is how the 4 steps of calculating training costs. Determine the overall training. That's direct costs such as design, trainer fees, materials, facilities. Identify potential saving results, employee retention, better customer service. Then it's computing potential savings, gathering data on performance results and assign a dollar cost to each of them. And then last, to conduct cost and savings benefit comparisons. Evaluate the cost per participant, the saving per participant, and how the cost and benefits relate to the business numbers. So these are possible costs and benefits of training. Trainer salary and time, trainer's salary, trainee's salary and time, materials for training, expenses for training, trainers and trainees, cost of the facilities and equipment, and then lost productivity. Benefits could be increase in production, reduction in errors and accidents, reduction in turnover, less supervision needed, ability to use new capabilities, and attitude changes. So the internal evaluation design, you've got post-measure, pre-measure, and pre-post measure with group control. The most obvious way to evaluate training effectiveness is to determine after the training whether the employees can perform the way the management wants them to perform. So that is the post measure. And your book gives you an example. Assume that a customer service manager has 20 representatives who need to improve their data entry speed. After one day training session, they take a test to measure their speeds. If the representatives can all type the required speed after the training, was the training beneficial? It is difficult to say. Perhaps most of them could have done as well before the training. So tests after training do not always clearly indicate whether a performance is a result of the training or could have been achieved without training. Pre and post measure, by differently designing the evaluation just discussed, the issue of pre-test skills levels can be considered. So if the data entry speed is measured before and after the training, then it will indicate whether the training made a difference. However, a question would remain, was any increase in the speed a response to the training, or did those employees simply work faster because they knew they were being tested? People often perform better when they know their efforts are being evaluated. And then pre and post measure with the control group. Another evaluation design can address the preceding problem. In addition to testing the 20 representatives who will be trained, the manager can test another group of representatives who will not be trained to see if they do as well as those who are to be trained. This second group is called the control group. After training, if the trained representatives work significantly faster than those who were not trained, the manager can reasonably sure that the training was effective. So I hope you have enjoyed this webcast. Thank you for participating. As always, if you want to have any questions, please put them out on the discussion board. And thank you for attending.